Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our event welcoming this quarter's Pritzker Fellows at the Institute of Politics. My name is Olivia Gross. I'm a second-year student from New York City in the college studying fundamentals, and I'm also an intern for the Fellows program here at the IOP. We're very happy to introduce you all to our Fellows this quarter, who will be hosting seminars and office hours for students. The links to sign up are in the chat and can be found on the IOP's website. First, we have Perry Bacon Jr., a Washington Post columnist who has also worked as a government and elections writer for Time Magazine, The Griot, and FiveThirtyEight. He also spends time on air as an analyst at MSNBC and as a fellow at New America. He writes on the partisan uncivil war and democratic backsliding, among many other topics. Next, we have Sarah Longwell, Republican strategist and publisher of The Bulwark. The Bulwark was founded in late 2018 and brings a moderate, broadly center-right perspective that invites disagreement and debate. Longwell is also the president and CEO of Longwell Partners, a full-service communications firm in DC. Next, we welcome Joel Benenson and Neil Newhouse, who will be co-hosting seminars this quarter. Joel Benenson is the founder and CEO of the Benenson Strategy Group, one of the leading political and corporate strategists in the world. Benenson led the award-winning research and polling programs for President Obama's 2008 and 2012 campaigns and is the only Democratic pollster in history to have played a leading role in 3 winning presidential campaigns. Neil Newhouse is a partner and co-founder of Public Opinion Strategies, a national political and public affairs research firm which has been described by the New York Times as the leading Republican polling company in the country. We're also very excited to welcome Keisha Lance-Bottoms, CNN political commentator and former mayor of Atlanta. She served as mayor from 2018 to 2022 and worked in office with a focus on bringing equitable outcomes to the forefront of government and commerce. And finally, we have Erin Simpson, a technology policy expert committed to advancing public interest values online. Simpson is currently the director of technology policy at the Center for American Progress, where she develops policy responses to a range of economic, social, and democratic challenges. Simpson graduated from the University of Chicago and, like many of you watching, was a student leader and organizer at the IOP. She also co-founded the IOP Tech Team. We are currently at a crucial moment in our nation's history, and this lineup of fellows is uniquely equipped to deal with the current state of affairs in the United States and abroad. With a variety of expertise in the technology industry, its role in politics, and the regulation that struggles to keep up. I am also pleased to introduce the man we all know, David Axelrod, the director of the Institute of Politics, host of the Axe Files, and former chief strategist and senior advisor to President Barack Obama. He will be moderating the discussion today with our panel of fellows. So now, please join me in welcoming Perry Bacon Jr., Sarah Longwell, Joel Benenson, Neil Newhouse, Keisha Lance-Bottoms, and Erin Simpson. Thank you.
Well, you guys can probably hear me, but somebody else has to make sure that you see me. Okay, let's see. Now they say I can start my video. There you are. There I am. And there you are. It's good to see all of you. First of all, thanks, Olivia. And a special thanks to all of you and to Joel and the mayor when they join. I see Joel appearing here. This fellows program, as Erin can attest because she was there right at the beginning of the IOP, really relies on the willingness and the generosity of practitioners, really skilled and lettered practitioners to come and share their expertise with us. And we're lucky to have another stellar class of fellows this quarter. And as Olivia said, at a very challenging time, interesting time, fraught time, depending on your perspective for our country. So I just want to start by asking you each to, we heard your biographies, talk a little bit about what you hope to accomplish in your seminars. What are you focusing on? What do you hope to bring? And Sarah, I'll just start with you.
Thanks, David. Thank you for having me. My hope is, look, I'm a longtime Republican. I spent most of my career working on Republican policy and politics, and Donald Trump changed that. And so in 2017, I started a number of groups with Bill Kristol and other people that might colloquially be known as the Never Trumpers, and focused on how we saved the Republican Party from Donald Trump. And that over time became how you defeat Donald Trump in 2020. And so we ran one of the largest, it's called Republican Voters Against Trump, We ran one of the largest attempts to reach swing voters. And I would say after years of hoping to save the Republican Party, I am less optimistic maybe than I've been about that project. And I am thinking about how you build power in the center. And in the seminars, I really hope to talk a lot about what I've seen change over the course of the last 5 years within the Republican Party and where I think it's going in the future, and how I think we can strengthen our democracy through politics, as well as talking a lot about how we think about swing voters, how we think about communications. In 2020, we sort of built a major project around how do you build permission structures for swing voters who have voted for Republicans their entire lives, but in this moment might vote for Joe Biden. And we did that by getting actual Republicans, thousands of them, to say, to make these testimonials, these little videos on their phones that said, hey, look, I've been a Republican my whole life, but I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. I think that taught us a lot about new modes of communication, new modes of persuasion. It was different from just running a bunch of ads that talked about why Donald Trump wasn't a good president. And I think I'd love to talk about lots of the new ways we're thinking about communicating with swing voters in this new media environment.
Great. Perry, you just picking up on what Sarah was discussing, you've written about the fact that while we have two political parties, we really have four distinct kind of factions. Talk about that and about the sort of balkanization of the parties in American politics.
I mean, who knows if I'm totally right about this, but I mean, we've always had kind of the party, the parties have never been totally unified internally, yes. But the piece I was writing kind of argued that you sort of have a Trump wing and versus a kind of McConnell wing, I'll call it, of the Republican Party. And the McConnell wing is definitely losing a lot of the races right now. But if you go look at primaries, you'll often see there's a sort of a more traditional long-term Republican who is probably a little less conservative on, let's say, immigration and issues like that than the Trump-aligned person. You see that in Georgia, for example, where David Perdue is challenging incumbent Governor Brian Kemp, and Kemp is more of a, I shouldn't say Kemp is not exactly Mitch McConnell, but he's running as more the traditional Republican, and Perdue. Although
oddly, he's running with the President Trump's endorsement.
Kemp is not. Perdue is running with Trump.
Kemp. Yes, Kemp. I'm sorry.
So, right.
Yes.
So, and then on the Democratic side, I think it's more obvious. You have sort of an AOC, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders versus, Biden. And I think that's playing out and I think that's sort of more obvious that there's a real, you're seeing a lot of like House primaries and mayoral races where that really plays out the most clearly, where there's an AOC or Warren endorsed candidate. And there's a sort of more quote unquote, I don't know the term establishment, but there's more of a more traditional Democrat running, and those fights are playing out there too.
And talk about what you're going to focus on in your seminar.
And so my seminar is about that sort of Democratic part. So I guess these ideas have been out there for a while, but I really had not heard of defund the police, forgive all college debt, get rid of the SAT. And there's a lot of ideas on the left of the Democratic Party that have come out. And so what I'm trying to do is bring in some speakers who represent those things and really get them to talk about many of these ideas are not going to happen anytime soon. So it'll be less about the sort of political viability of many of them, which are not that viable right now, unless you're in like San Francisco or Boston, but more to talk about like where these ideas come from, what's the underlying thinking from them, is there anything useful about these ideas, what's a sort of a more palatable version that could happen. So that's kind of where the left has a lot of ideas I hadn't really heard of really even 3 years ago. So I'm trying to explore those in a way that will be useful for hopefully the students and also for my own work in writing about politics.
Feels as if there are those on the Republican side who are trying to make the country more familiar with ideas on the left. It seems to me, but that's probably part of the discussion.
Of course.
Erin, first of all, it is such a thrill to welcome back an IOP student as a fellow, and talk about your journey and how you went from here to there, because you're now really one of the bright young experts in the world on the issue of disinformation and social media. So talk about how you got from here to there, and then talk about how you want to use your seminar.
Well, first, thank you so much. I can't tell you how excited I am to be back and to be back as a fellow. I mean, I was there almost 10 years ago now, in 2013, when the Fellows program started. And so this is such like a wild life moment to get to come back like this. And I just can't tell all of you how excited I am to sort of bring you in, sort of to like the seats that I was sitting in, and bring you along. So I had a wonderful sort of career, like in public service in different ways, from working in civic tech in Chicago and working on the tech team while I was at the IOP, to New York. I was working in the civic tech ecosystem there. I was the director of programs at Civic Hall Labs, which was like a civic tech R&D nonprofit. From there, I headed to Oxford, to the Oxford Internet Institute, to sort of think really broadly about different questions around technology and society. And I started up there with the Computational Propaganda Project, which was doing a lot of the disinformation analysis in different democratic elections around the world. And so thinking about the European election, the Indian elections, the Brazilian elections, and of course, the US elections in 16, 18, 20, and trying to understand sort of both foreign and domestic disinformation. And so I'm so excited to now think about that from a policy standpoint. So I'm the director of technology policy at the Center for American Progress, where the question is no longer, what is the scope of the problem, or, what does this mean sort of for our democracy, for our election, but how are we going to fix this? And that's kind of the question that I'm bringing to my seminar.
Yes, and of course, that will be the focus of a conference that we will be holding at the university in conjunction with the Atlantic from April 6th through 8th, where we do hope to produce some answers to what is a really, really complex question. I want to get back to you on that in a minute. Neil, you have you and I are contemporaries, I guess, in the political business.
Yeah, we're old.
And you have. I was trying to be kind about it to both you and me, but you've blown our cover. You've seen the evolution of polling. I mean, one of the things you're going to be doing with Joel is working with students on the development of a poll on this issue of disinformation, to sort of get to the core of it and really understand how people get information and how that information shapes their opinions. Talk to me about the evolution of polling and the challenges that exist today that are new. And is polling more challenging today than when you started doing it?
Well, I have to admit, David, when I started polling, I took a polling course in college, and it was 1972, and the professor had been hired by some local candidate to do a poll. He asked for volunteers, and so I did a poll when I was in college. And so you'll think, okay, well, you got in the phone bank and you did the phone calls. No, we did door-to-door polling. And this is back in 1972. And, it has gone from there to landline now, and then to, cells, begrudgingly. Now, the only people you reach on landlines are, seniors, anybody over the age of 55. You're texting people to get answers. You're calling them on cell phones. The business has changed. How we reach people has changed. How campaigns communicate has changed, and it's made it extraordinarily more difficult. It's more difficult. It is much more expensive. Back in early 80s, when I did volunteer survey research phone banks when I was with the Republican National Committee, we would list out 5 telephone numbers for every one interview we wanted to complete. And generally our interviewers were able to do that. Nowadays, you need 700 numbers, 700 dials to complete an interview. So that's changed dramatically. But this the class Joel and I are doing, I am really looking forward to it. It is going to be fun. It's not just, having these students learn about disinformation, but how do you write a question and have an understanding of, are people going to answer it the way I want them to answer it? Or the way are they answering the question I really want to know the answer to? And then what do you do with the data? We can teach them polling. I'm not sure you can teach somebody how to analyze a survey and how to read into it. And then what action do you take as a result of it? So I'm looking forward to that discussion.
Yeah, look, we're really excited about this because this is unlike many of the seminars we've had. They're all great, but hopefully everyone who participates in this will come with a much richer understanding of, hey, Mayor, how are you? There you are. Good to see you.
Hey, good evening.
I'm going to be right with you. I just finishing up a point here with Neil. I mean, there is so much that goes into developing a poll that has that both yields results that are reliable and also results that are actionable. And as the title of this seminar suggests, it's both a science and an art. So you guys are two experienced artists as well as great technicians in the field of polling. So I'm really happy that our students are going to be exposed to that. Mayor, are you there? There you are. Well, welcome. We're so excited to have you. And not just because you were a distinguished mayor of a great American city, but also because you have a long history with this great American city, the city of Chicago. Talk to me a little bit about your relationship with the South Side of Chicago, and also give us a little bit of a preview of what you hope to do in your seminars.
Well, good evening, everyone. My apologies for my tardiness. One of the things that I was not able to resolve as mayor of Atlanta was our traffic. So I am very happy to join you. But my relationship, as you know, David, with Chicago goes very deep. My dad was born in the Mississippi Delta. His name was Major Lance, and he was a very famous R&B singer, as he liked to remind me.
Yes.
On OK Records in the 1960s. And OK Records was like the Motown of Chicago, with Curtis Mayfield, The Impressions, Gene Chandler, Jackie Wilson, just some really great talents out of Chicago. And my grandmother's house is at 87th and South Calumet. They moved there from Cabrini Green when my dad made when his first hit happened. And my aunt and my cousins still live in that home. So there are a lot of Lances throughout Chicago, and I look forward to seeing them as well as everyone at the University of Chicago.
Bring them down. We'd like to meet them too.
Yes, well, there are a lot. My dad came from a really big family.
Well, we'll bring them down and we'll tee up some of your dad's hits and we'll go from there. So talk about the seminar and the seminars and what you hope to do with them.
I'm really excited about this discussion. One of the big takeaways that I had as mayor was just really surrounding the expectation of government. And I often give the example, and my apologies, and rushing to sit down, I did not close my blind, so hopefully the sun will move soon.
No
but
worries.
One of my big takeaways just really surrounded what the expectations were with government. And I would often give this example that with communities of color, quite often underserved communities, the expectations quite often would be for government to take an issue and resolve it from steps 1 through 10. Not for a lack of will, but just really a lack of understanding of how communities could engage and what expectations communities should have around delivery of services. When I joined the city council 8 years prior to becoming mayor, what really struck me is how grateful people were that I was responsive to their issues. And I was thankful that they were grateful, but also it saddened me that the level of expectation was so low that doing the bare minimum was celebrated, just in terms of being responsive to constituent issues. So what I hope in this seminar is that we really examine what the role of government is and how do we empower communities to empower themselves, so that when a term is up for an effective leader, communities have the tools they need to make sure that they are getting what they need in return. And when I compare that with more affluent communities, it was often as if they didn't want government to be involved at all. They want to take an issue steps 1 through 9, and they would call us for step 10 if they needed us. And if you think about how effective that can be, if we can empower communities across the country to expect more and to know how to get more out of government, I think it can be a game changer for cities. And so we're going to examine going all the way to the Great Migration, beginning with Ambassador Young, who has agreed to be my first guest to talk about the migration of cities and families like my family, the impact that it's had on cities, and then we'll explore many other topics around the same area.
Excellent, excellent. Sarah, just getting back to your point, it was kind of stark when you said that you'd sort of given up on your notion of sort of reclaiming the Republican Party. Why is that? You speak from the perspective of a conservative, sort of mainstream Republican.
Yeah, there's really 2 reasons. And actually, we're going to get into both of them in this seminar. So one is, my head's deep in 2022 right now. And if you look at when I was thinking about Trump early on, I saw him as a cancer on the party. And I felt like if you could cut him out, that the institutional muscle memory of the Republican Party would really bounce back. But that's not what happened. Trump has metastasized. And as you look across the field of 2022 candidates, you see a ton of mini Trumps running around, running specifically on stop the steal platforms, and not just in these Senate races like David Perdue, but in governor's races, in Secretary of State races, where those are the people who are going to oversee our elections. I mean, a number of the Secretary of States running are explicitly running on the fact that they would not have certified the 2020 election, that they want to audit, all the machines. And so that's a big part of it, is just seeing how Donald Trump has attracted a new type of candidate into the field. The other thing is that one of the first things I started doing in 2018, when I began doing this work, was I started doing focus groups. I was convinced that I completely had misunderstood something that was going on in the Republican Party, because obviously I didn't think that there was a lot of decent candidates in the 2016 field. I feel differently about them today than I did at the time, but I was a big Jeb Rubio person. I was like, okay, I've spent too much time in think tanks. I don't understand what's going on with the Republican Party. So I started doing focus groups with Trump voters to understand, did they really like this guy or what was going on? And after 4 years of doing consistent focus groups, I do them almost every week. There's this Russian expression, the appetite increases while you're eating. I have watched voters change. I have watched voters go from, I didn't vote for Trump, I voted against Hillary Clinton, to give me more of the angry stuff. Give me more of the, beating up, just, drinking liberal tears. If it's not Trump, the next person is, they like Kristi Noem, they like Ron DeSantis. They don't want Mitt Romney. They don't want Liz Cheney. They don't want Paul Ryan. And so I think that there's been a real change in the Republican Party, and that's something I would like to explore. And then, that's why Perry's work is so interesting, and I read all of it because I think a lot about who comprises these parties now, and those moderates that he's talking about, they don't feel as comfortable in the Trump Republican Party. And so to this question of, do swing voters exist? Who are they and where are they going? There's an evolution going on in the political parties. There's a political realignment going on where a lot of these college educated suburban voters who might have voted for Mitt Romney or John McCain, they're not, they probably voted for Joe Biden. But vice versa, there's a lot of white working class voters who might have historically been Democrats, been Union Democrats. They're more culturally MAGA and they're moving too. And so exploring that to me has been like the work that I have been doing this whole time, and then actively thinking about how you persuade those swing voters as well.
I didn't realize that saying that the appetite grows while you're eating was Russian. My trainer claimed it as his original thought. But
Susan Glasser told me that it was a Russian expression. I have been stealing it from her ever since.
But speaking of that, Erin, it was interesting to hear Sarah talk about the sort of voracious appetite for outrage. And that is kind of central to the problem that we face on social media, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I was thinking of that too when Sarah was describing it. The supply and demand go together, right? It's not just that algorithms are pumping out the most outrageous content, even though we are maximizing for engagement, because we're maximizing for time on tech platforms. So all of our financial incentives are about engagement and rage and how much we can get online. And so that's a problem. Like, we're not optimizing for civic values there, but there's also such high demand. A lot of what we find with people who are sharing misinformation is it's really not about whether or not I think it's true. It's just about it resonates with a deep story that I've been told, right? It resonates culturally with me as someone who's like on the outset, or it like complies with my predetermined beliefs. And it's a great sort of question to ask because it gets back to this like socio-technical problem, right? Like, it's not just that we have a social media problem. It's like we have a cultural problem and a cultural demand for this kind of information and this kind of discourse. And we have tools that are just hyper optimized to give that to people. And dealing with both at one time is hard.
Perry, I threw off an offhanded remark at the end of your comments about some of the ideas of the left, but these concepts, and I'm interested in the mayor's thoughts on this as well. You were a little bit late, so Perry's talked about wanting to explore, challenge, understand some of the ideas of the left, such as defund police and so on. It seems to me these have created a political problem for Democrats. Perry, is that fair to?
So I'm going to try to do a few different ideas. Like I'm bringing in Felicia Wong is an economic policy expert. Like, a lot of things she's been working on are in Biden's budget today, like the billionaires tax. So I think on the, I would say on the economic policy, we have a more, this administration is to the left of where Obama was in a lot of policies. And I think that is a factor in that the party's sort of median has moved left on economic policy. And I think that has resulted in the child tax credit and some policies that I think are not that particularly unpopular and are in cases some cases very popular. So
I'm willing to bet, and I don't know, Neil Newhouse can correct me if I'm wrong. I would guess a billionaire's tax will probably poll pretty well.
Yeah. So it depends on, and then some of the issues like on education policy, it depends on what you look at. And then obviously defund is not popular. I don't think there's I think there's no debate there. So I think that's one where to be fair, Biden, I think Biden has in some ways addressed it in a number of ways, both in 2020 and today, honestly.
Yeah, no, he's been clear for, throughout on that issue. But like I said to you before, Mayor, I responded to Perry before by saying, he said a lot of these ideas of the left aren't known. And I said, I think some of the ideas of the left are known because Republicans make them known for their own purposes. Talk to me as someone who's the only person here who's actually been on a ballot about the pressures within the party, within your party, to harmonize all of this.
I think the biggest challenge that we have as a party is really separating reality from the noise. And that can sometimes be difficult because when you go online and you look on social media, it appears that people in the party feel one way about certain issues. But then if you walk into the hair salon or the barbershop, the conversation is completely different. And that was my sense, even around the whole defund the police conversation. I would watch what was happening with younger progressive voters online, and you would get the sense that everyone wanted to defund the police. But I would say repeatedly, if I walked into a meeting, a community meeting with a group of African-American seniors, they would demand more police in their communities. They want safe interactions with police, but their complaint is that we don't have enough coverage and that we aren't treating our officers the way that we should, because these are the same seniors that take the officers turkeys on Thanksgiving and honey baked hams at Christmas. And our challenge, again, as a party, is just really to understand where we are and how we can get people to somehow get back to coming to the middle. And I think the election of Joe Biden really showed that Democrats really, most Democrats, the majority anyway, prefer a candidate who's more moderate on the issues. But we also know that the demographics of the country continues to change daily. We've got younger voters who are voting in record numbers. I have one in my household who voted for the first time in the last presidential election. And I say that between my 19-year-old son and my mother, I have the best focus groups that you can find in America, because I get a really good sense on how they feel about the issues, and they really represent a huge voting bloc. And so I think, and then just lastly, I think that where we continue to fall short is on our messaging. We have not perfected messaging the same way that the Republican Party has. So whatever our stance is on any number of issues, we continue to play catch up with messaging, and we are not as proactive with the messaging. Joe Biden can give 10 speeches a day. He can give 12 press conferences a day. My 19-year-old will never see it because he's never even seen me on CNN. He doesn't turn on the television. But I think a page that we can take out of the Republican playbook is how you speak to a multitude of people in a way that they will receive the messaging, how you can push out the same message, but how you tweak it for people from 19 on up to our senior citizens.
Yeah. Let me just go on the record as saying I think 9 press conferences a day would be a mistake. But Neil, you know,
but hey, actually, let me respond to the mayor said. I mean, there are lots of stuff in there I disagree with. I mean, I don't think the Democrats have a communications message as much as they have a communications problem as much as they have a policy problem. I mean, you talk about how Republicans are good at focusing on Democratic policies. Yeah, when the most unpopular politician in the country right now is the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, it gives you a lot to work with. And and AOC's more liberal positions. It is, I mean, part of where Republicans are trying to do this election cycle is continuing to push Democrats out further to the left. The worst thing that could have happened to the Democrats in the 2020 election is that they were dead even in the Senate. I mean, it'd be better for you not to have won the Senate the way things have worked out.
I would disagree with that. As I look at our newest member, soon to be, of the Supreme Court, I'm very grateful for the numbers.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand that. But each part, and to what the mayor says, 80% of Republicans think that Democrats are socialists, and 79% of Democrats think Republicans are racist. There's not a lot of room in there for middle, for common ground. We have become extraordinarily more polarized over the past decade.
Well, let me ask you a question about that. I don't think, and Joel's not here, and I would like to get his word on this, but without engaging in the sort of partisan back and forth on this, when you poll, that primary universe is different, isn't it, than certainly in these swing states and districts. The primary electorate in both parties looks much different than the general election electorate. Yeah, go ahead, speak to that.
Yeah, Ax, I mean, there's no question. And you talk about Republican primary voters, they're not just conservative. It's not ideology as much as it is allegiance to Trump. And you see that really among these Republican primary voters, so much so that it's hard to see a anti-Trump Republican winning in a competitive primary any place in the country that's not like a five-way race. And the same thing on the Democratic side, I think the energy and the heart of the Democratic Party is on its left, is on the Bernie Sanders and AOC, advocates. That's where the energy is among Democrats, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when so Democrats will be nominating more liberal candidates, Republicans will be nominating more Trump and more conservative candidates. Yeah. That keeps us going.
Although they did, I think in the main you're right about the primaries. In the presidential primaries, the Democrats rejected Bernie Sanders and rejected Elizabeth Warren and nominated Joe Biden.
I don't think that was the mayor. I said this earlier. I mean, it shows the willingness of Democrats to elect moderate candidates. From my point of view, because I'm the Republican here, I think they settled. I think Democrats settled in 2020 because they thought he was the guy who could beat Donald Trump. That's the only thing they were concerned about. And so I don't think it was as much ideological as it was, and it was impacted by COVID, but that's what I think was going on there. But I'm not in that party, so I stand to be corrected.
So Tony Fabrizio, just a second, Mayor. Yeah. Tony Fabrizio, who polled for Trump and well, agrees with you and says when he was a fellow last fall, he said, you have to go through the Trump toll booth in order to win the Republican primary. But here's Perry, you mentioned the Kemp-Perdue race. Right now, it doesn't look like, this is a vengeance race for the president. He's angry at Kemp. He endorsed Perdue, but it doesn't look like Purdue's going to win that primary. What does that mean? And I should ask Sarah the same question.
I was in Atlanta. I want to hear what the mayor thinks too, but the reporters I talked to in Georgia did have the sense that Kemp was going to probably win that primary, but the fact that the incumbent governor of a state has to go through a primary and probably is going to only get 60% is galling. I still think Trump endorsing you if you're a Republican means you can almost beat the incumbent governor. It still tells you that Trump has a lot of power in the party. So I think that in general, I agree with Neil. I would say the part I disagree with Neil about is, or maybe let me not speak for what Neil said, but on the Democratic side, I do think even the 2021 primaries have followed the same pattern as 2020. In general, when there's a race between sort of a Warren AOC candidate and a Bidenish candidate, that the Bidenish candidate has won in 2021. So I think that right now the power in the parties is the Trump wing is powerful in the GOP, but I think the Biden sort of wing, if not controlling the ideas, is still winning most of the primaries.
Sarah, you have anything to add? We're going to turn to questions shortly here, but
I guess I'll just say briefly, I totally agree with Perry on, I think that people think that the Democratic base is these young progressive activists, but that's not. That's the Democratic apparatus, but the base is like, Black voters and college-educated suburban voters that tend to be much more moderate and that elected Joe Biden in the primary. And then the other thing I'd say, though, on Trump's power in the party, and there's a lot of people trying to say, oh, Trump's hold on the party is waning. And they're looking at a couple, data points. One of them they might say was the Alabama race, where you get a guy like Mo Brooks, who Trump endorsed, who he recently unendorsed because Mo Brooks was running in third place. But the guy who was replacing him is a guy named Mike Durant. And the second that Mo Brooks got unendorsed, Mike Durant came out with a statement to talk about how the number one issue for Alabamans was the fact that the election was stolen. And so he felt like in order for him to win and to be the one that gets the Trump endorsement and have it taken away is to go on the record as a stop the stealer. And I think that speaks not against Trump's power in the party, but to Trump's power and control over the party.
But Katie, one of the reasons he did that was to try to make sure that the other candidate didn't get the endorsement. He wanted to make it more difficult. So not just that.
But still,
I know. But you don't want to be the guy, the candidate running against the Trump endorsed candidate. That many times this year will be a losing proposition.
Erin, what is all this? How does all this play out in the social media world, in the sort of siloed world of social media?
Well, not so siloed, right? I mean, people try to get things trending on social media in part so that it can get on TV, so that it can become something viral and get into the news or be covered by traditional media. And so we have all of our journalists sort of live and captive, like there's a captive audience online. And then it's, if you're not speaking to like elites on Twitter, like you're getting in there and you're making a Facebook group for every county, GOP or Democratic Party and spreading hyper localized versions of the same message over and over, like we saw with Stop the Steal. And so the question coming into 2022 that we need to be asking of all of these platforms is, how do we want them to handle something like Mo Brooks putting out a campaign ad glorifying January 6th? What policies do we want that to go under? Do we want that to be moderated? How so? I mean, these are legitimate candidates for election. And so what, do we want people to see like what they're putting up, and should, Facebook get a cut and get those advertising dollars, or is that so anti-democratic that we actually don't want that to be allowed? And so this poses a whole bunch of problems where we have a lot of information control dials that we can turn on and off, and we need to be asking like, what should we do with those?
Mayor, I cut you off before. I didn't know whether you were champing at the bit to...
No, and it was touched on. I absolutely think Kemp is going to beat Perdue in the primary, and I would put money on it that Warnock is going to beat Herschel Walker in the general election. You've got a whole slate of Republicans in this state who are incumbents who have rejected Donald Trump, and we still have this grand jury investigation that's ongoing with our district attorney as well. So I don't think Trump is going to fare well in Georgia at all. And we're going to see it very soon because we've got the primaries coming up in the next few months.
Let us go to questions. Noelle Diaz, a master's student with a committee on in the Committee on International Relations. Are you here?
I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you, David. Good evening. My question is linking together Perry's and Erin's focus areas, racial equity in society and disinformation, respectively. I was wondering whether you feel that disinformation is playing an active role in keeping sustainable action from taking place, or if current measures are able to hold up against pushback. Thank you.
Well, I'll start and then Perry can continue, I guess. But just to say, like, disinformation is super racialized, and obviously, like, we lived in a really racist society well before, like, we had social media companies. And so the question is, like, how do, like, so much of the disinformation apparatus, especially for like financial gain or political gain, is about like stoking racial tensions or divisions, right? Like in 2016, the Senate Intelligence Committee report found that like Russia was explicitly trying to inflame racial tensions, because that's a divide in the United States that is really going to like pay dividends for them in terms of online engagement. And so, racialized disinformation in this country is nothing new. We've had it with every single technology, from like the printing press to the telegraph to now. And we'll talk about that a lot in the seminar in terms of like how the communication technology changes. But for my part, racism preceding and like a really fertile ground for disinformation to play off of.
That was a great answer. I'm going to leave that there. I think that was a great answer.
Okay. All right. Let me move on to Joel. If you give me the next question, I will introduce them. Joel. Well, while we wait for the next question, I want to ask you, Sarah, what does that mean? You just heard the conversation about Georgia. You were hanging crepe on the non-Trump, the never Trumper party, but it sounds like he's gonna lose some ground in Georgia. What does that mean?
I mean, I think it's an incumbency bias. Look, I mean, here's the thing. So, look, I think David Perdue has just lost a Senate race. People think he's a phony in the state. And now he's going to run as an explicit stop the steal candidate against an incumbent that people gave high marks on the pandemic and who did pass a bill after the election around election integrity. And so they feel like he's done a fine enough job. I think that, look, everybody's going to read every primary as a referendum on Trump. And I think that you're probably going to end up with a bit of a mixed bag around those, and that the better thing to look at is all of the candidates who are running and how Trumpified are they. You've got Carrie Lake in Arizona, who's running on a Stop the Steal platform for governor. She's an anti-vaxxer, MyPillow guy endorsed person. Eric Greitens, who tied a woman up in her basement, abused her, had to resign in disgrace. He's currently running a front runner in Missouri. You've got Sean Parnell, another abuser who had to drop out in Pennsylvania. So now you've got Dr. Oz versus a guy named McCoy. I mean, I'm not going to go through all the candidates, but if you go through them, it's a wild bunch that the Republicans are running. And just to the mayor's point, I think if Democrats were a bit better on messaging, they'd be able to hang this crop of candidates around the Republicans and turn it into a much more like a 2010 environment where you had Christine O'Donnell and Sharon Angle. And even though the Republicans blew out the Dems in the House, they were able to hold a lot of ground in the Senate because the Republicans were just too crazy for the mainstream.
Hey, Ax,
Yeah, go ahead,
guys. You gotta looking at the national political environment. Georgia is, I mean, obviously an incredibly important state, but it doesn't act on its own. It is impacted by what's going on nationally. You're looking at President Biden now with a 40% job approval. That means somebody's got to run 10 points ahead of Joe Biden. That just doesn't happen. And I mean, and especially in the last election, we had 9% of Americans who split their tickets between president and Congress. So in these midterm elections, when at first midterm elected president, the party in power loses seats and they lose across the board. And so sometimes, guys, the best candidate doesn't win. The most qualified people don't win. I mean, it's happened on both sides, but go back to 2014, we had a lot of guys who were behind in the polls going into election day, and they all put it out. We had a terrific year, and it's because of the disparity in turnout in midterm elections. Don't count these races done.
Yeah. No, I don't think. Yeah.
But the mayor just said something too about Herschel Walker and thinking that Herschel Walker was going to win. I agree with Neil. I would be shocked if Herschel Walker didn't win. And he's a very bad candidate, but in a wave election, with as much as people love Herschel Walker in Georgia, with Mitch McConnell's endorsement, I don't want Herschel Walker to be the senator from Georgia, but I'd be shocked if he didn't win.
Mayor, don't respond, because we'll have plenty of time to have this debate and we'll know but I'm going to fumble the ball if I don't get some more questions in here. So Amelia Gibbs, a first-year student in the college, has written a question. Many Democrats are saying that the new voter suppression signifies a new Jim Crow era, while others want to focus on the progress America has made towards democracy. What do each of you think? Is this a slippery slope? So, Mayor, it's an interesting question. I mean, two things can be true at once, I guess. But where are we relative to voting rights in the country?
Yeah, we're not in a good place, and it has everything to do with these maps that need to be addressed across the country. And what's really alarming for me is, as I'm watching Georgia and other states, the first year was just really a shot across the bow, and now we're getting deeper and deeper into this dark area of voter suppression. So in Georgia, I know people heard the stories. You can't pass out water in line, limiting the number of drop boxes, making it more difficult for people to send in absentee ballots, the whole list. And then this session, we saw a bill introduced to eliminate drop boxes completely. And so there are these incremental steps that are very alarming to me. But I asked my mom when President Biden and Vice President Harris came to speak, and they spoke in an area between Morehouse College and Clark Atlanta University. And my mom went there many, many years ago. And I asked her, how did it feel to sit there on that campus and hear them still talking about voting rights decades later? And I was a bit surprised by her answer. I was expecting her to say that it saddened her. And what she said to me is that it made her very proud that they were still focused on getting it right. And so, I think people have been disheartened, but I think what you're going to see in Georgia, and I think what you're going to see around the country, the more these efforts are pushed, the more it is going to encourage people to show up and vote. What we saw in Georgia the last election cycle was a turnout that we've never seen before in this state. And what I felt was an energy that reminded me of the energy I see when I look at pictures of people dressed in their Sunday best waiting in line to vote. That's what I saw with people in Georgia. I saw a modern day version of that there was such a resolve and commitment to casting a vote no matter what. And if we can keep that energy up, Herschel Walker, who is just new back to the state of Georgia, and David Perdue will both lose.
I would love to go on here, but I have to get these questions in. So you're all skilled and can probably slip whatever thought you had in at the end of the answer that you give to these questions. The next question is from Katie Fraser, who will appear on the screen.
Hi, I'm Katie Frazier, a first year at the college, studying political science and history. And this is a little bit off topic from what was discussed, but I was just wondering a little bit background-wise. I know everyone has kind of a diverse set of different careers within politics, and so I was wondering about some of the things y'all did in your academic experience overall that helped shape your political views, and also like how you think about politics in the world.
David.
No, go ahead, Perry.
So I worked at the college paper, and I thought that was, obviously is going to be a journal. I think that was great training. You had to do some real stories. I think that was great training, obviously. I think James Bennett, who was the editor of The Atlantic and was until recently the editor of the New York Times magazine editorial page, came to speak. So whenever there was a class or a speaker series that involved practitioners, I made like this on some level, I made sure to attend those, and it was helpful in terms of making context. It was helpful in terms of like learning. So I think that, classes are important and the main courses are obviously important, but I think anything you can do that sort of gets you thinking about, I went to Yale, and like at the end, a lot of people were like, what do I do if I don't want to be an investment banker or a lawyer or a doctor? What other jobs are there? And I think it's important to sort of get a sense from people like, I didn't meet a lot of pollsters in my 4 years at college, but polling seems like a great career. It seems interesting. So I wish I had had more exposure to a broader variety of professions. And I think that's important to get if you can.
All right, I'm going to piggyback on Perry. I spent 4 years at Duke, and I took a number of poli-sci courses, one of which voting behavior. That really fascinated me, especially we did it in the fall of '72, which was the Jimmy Carter election. And we had two pollsters come to our campus to speak, Pat Cadell and Peter Hart, both Democratic, well-known pollsters. I loved it. I fell in love with the profession by listening to these guys talk. I actually applied for a job with Peter Hart afterwards. I saved the rejection letter. But that's what turned me on to politics. And from there, I basically worked on campaigns. My love is, I love working campaigns. I've done everything from, stadium initiatives to governor's races to congressionals and to mayor's races. And I love working on campaigns.
I've got to before I turn to the next question, I've got to ask you, Erin, to name one course that you took at the University of Chicago that was not an IOP event or an IOP Fellows seminar that set you on the course you're on, if there was one.
Yeah. First, kudos to Perry for basically saying, come to my seminar as your advice. I was like, oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, like come engage in seminars with practitioners. That's a good setup. A history of sexuality, Michel Foucault, great background for so many things. The sociology of deviance, really good. People are weird. Political science is just one part of the picture. And so take a bunch of different things. There's so much to learn.
Andrew Simon, Bo Simon, who is a co-chair of the Student Advisory Board at the IOP, for the last question.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much. It's been a great conversation. My question is about increasing income inequality in the US. So as we see sort of increased geographic sorting based on income and racial lines in the US, and we see things like the city of Buckhead trying to secede from this broader city of Atlanta, what do you think that foreshadows about the future of politics in American cities and the future of American communities?
Mayor, I think that's addressed to you.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the city of Buckhead. I always thought that was a Trump movement. And when he jumped in and commented on it when it was killed in during the legislative session this year, it confirmed my thoughts. But I think what it also showed is that at a national level, there is a willingness to interfere with local politics. And part of what we will explore during my course, we're going to talk about income inequality, and we're going to talk about some of the pilot programs that are happening across the country. One that I was able to kick off before my term was over was related to mayors for guaranteed income. This program was created by the Mayor Tubbs, former mayor of Stockton, California, and we're doing it as a test project in Atlanta. A lot of mayors have signed on. Getting private money to fund this pilot to see if it truly makes a difference, because that's a big conversation, especially when you look at a city like Atlanta. We really are a tale of two cities, and it's not necessarily a racial divide in our city. It really is about income inequality and access to quality public education. And that divide is huge, even in the African-American community in Atlanta. And we're going to talk about that during the seminar.
Thanks, Bo. You are a brilliant and varied group with very different experiences and great perspectives. And I just hope that all the students who are listening and those who aren't take full advantage of your presence on campus. We're lucky to have you all. Appreciate you joining me here today, and I can't wait to be with you in person. So thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who's listened. And welcome to the spring quarter.